Hello, this is Rob Orrison with the Emerging Civil War and the Prince William County Historic Preservation Division. I'm joined here with my colleague Kevin Pawlak of Ben Lomond and Bristow Station Battlefield. Behind me is a very little known monument that's been placed here back in the 90s to signify a very important event that took place here where we're standing on the morning of July 21st, 1861. Now, to give you some background, keep in mind, in July of 1861, the Confederates had been here in the Manassas area for about 2 months. And in that time, they had set up a communication system. A man named E. Porter Alexander, which many of you will remember from Gettysburg as being an artillery commander, here at Manassas, he's actually a communications officer. He had been trained in the U.S. Army before the war in a new system of communicating between over long distances using a system of flags. Alexander will be picked by Beauregard to take the smartest men he can find. So he had to go through all these different units here in Manassas and pick the smartest men and train them in this new system of communication. Alexander will set up 4 signal stations here in the Prince William Fairfax area. One would be at the Van Pelt House behind the modern-day Stone Bridge on the actual battlefield park today. Another one would be in Centerville, which was a major Confederate outpost at that time. Another one would be at the McLean House, the very famous Wilmer McLean, where Beauregard had his headquarters. He'll have a signal station there. And then here behind us on this hill, which is now called Signal Hill, but at the time of the war, it was called the Wilcoxon Hill for the Wilcoxon farm that stood here in 1861. Now keep in mind, these signal stations are not towers. Later in the war, when you see these signal stations, they're usually well-built wooden structures. Here in 1861, these men are just on the high spots in the different spots across the landscape here. So no wooden structures. But from here, at top of Wilcoxon Hill, behind you, they can see all the way to the Stonebridge area, approximately 8 miles. And they can communicate back and forth, keeping an eye off to your left, my right, in the direction of where they know the Union Army will be arriving here at some point in time. They know that because on top of just having these nice telegraph stations everywhere, signal stations everywhere, Beauregard has a well-entrenched, well-placed spy network within Washington, D.C. Keep in mind, 1861, Washington, D.C. is a southern town. We don't think of it that way today, but it was in 1861. Beauregard has different spies. Rose Greenhow, a very famous spy, will actually be in Washington, D.C. and be sending communications back to Beauregard very regularly here in Manassas. Some will say Beauregard knew when McDowell was leaving Washington, D.C. before most of McDowell's division commanders knew. Not sure if that's true, but that just underscores the importance of Beauregard's spy network. And so these Confederates know that the Union troops are going to come out this direction at some point mid-July. And these signal stations here, like Kevin's going to get into more details about this one, will actually give Beauregard a good, well-advanced notice of when McDowell will be approaching. So I'm going to turn over to Kevin to talk about what happens here on July 21st.
So as Rob mentioned, we're well south of the area that we now call the Manassas battlefield. But this area does play significance into how that battle shapes out. So the morning of July 21st, Irvin McDowell's plan for the next day was set in motion. And his plan was essentially this: to send Daniel Tyler's division straight towards the Confederate left flank, the Stone Bridge carrying the Warrenton Turnpike, over Bull Run, which was held and occupied by about 1,100 South Carolinians and Louisianans under the command of Nathan Shanks Evans. Tyler's division was meant to keep Evans' attention occupied in the area around the Stone Bridge. In the meantime, 2 federal divisions, nearly 13,000 men, would slip to the north around the left flank of Evans' brigade, and then they would advance south, uncovering more and more crossings as they kept pushing south of Bull Run, and that would allow more federal troops to cross to the west and south sides of that stream, increasing the federal power on that side of the stream, on the Confederate side of Bull Run. At about 8:45 in the morning, Nathan Evans had already been picking up on the idea that Daniel Tyler's division and his attack at the Stone Bridge was not really an attack at all. Instead, it was just a diversion, a feint, basically meant to keep Evans' attention. And so Nathan Evans was already starting to feel that because Tyler was not putting most of his men forward, he was not putting all of his energy into that supposed attack against the Stone Bridge, Evans was starting to figure out where else is the Federal Army going to come from. He had skirmishers and pickets posted upstream from his position that were starting to sense a Federal presence approaching from that direction. But what E. Porter Alexander told Evans at the Van Pelt House from this signal station here on Wilcoxon Hill. It's words that would live forever in fame for the Confederate Army and really for most Civil War historians. Look out for your left, you are turned. That was the final piece of confirmation that Nathan Evans needed, that Tyler's attack against the stone bridge was just a feint. Evans realized that there were Federal troops slipping around his left flank, and so he left a very, very small force to defend the stone bridge, while Evans pulled about 900 of his 1,100 men off to his left and north to a commanding ridge line called Matthews Hill, where he was going to oppose single-handedly those 13,000 Federal troops. Perhaps, if it was not for that communique that was passed from this signal station up to the Van Pelt signal station where Shanks Evans was positioned, Evans may not have been positioned in time to meet these 13,000 Federal soldiers that made up Irvin McDowell's flanking column. So the communication that was sent from here does a whole heck of a lot to shape the Battle of First Manassas as we know it on July 21st, 1861.